attend at this point. It's for free, so I love sharing it online for those who missed out. Yeah, so for those of you seeing my face for the first time today, I'm Marie. I'm a full-time mom of 2 little ones, 2 girls ages 3 and 1 years old. And yeah, before I had the girls, I actually taught myself to paint. I firmly believed for the longest time that I can't draw, let alone paint. And then one day I was just tired of writer's block because that was my other hobby. And then painting ensued from there. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but really just want to encourage you guys that you don't have to have studied art at school or even have thought that you're great at it to at some point change your mind about it. So that's what I'm really passionate about. Welcome to those guys who just joined us now. You haven't missed much, just to notice that you are being recorded. So yeah, don't do any too funny things that you don't want your mom to see on Zoom. Yeah, so a quick couple of house rules just quickly. I'm going to switch everyone back to not being able to unmute themselves. It's just to make it easy that there's no background noise, that you guys can hear me. But you're welcome to pop questions in the chat. And my husband, Sean, will pop in quickly. Say hello, Sean. He's my admin, so he'll be monitoring the questions and stuff on the chat, because obviously when I'm painting I can't multitask that well. I can if I have to, but I want you guys to have my full attention. So you're welcome to pop questions as we go, and I'll address them as soon as I can. And yeah, please have fun. Please just let yourself relax and enjoy this. It's really just a paint party with a little bit of focused questions, and if you want to use any other medium, you're welcome as well. Danya, I'm quickly going to correct myself. She doesn't have not good brushes. She has terrible brushes, but Danya, we'll see what we can do with them tonight, okay? Otherwise, you can give them to your girls to play makeup with or something. All right. Quickly, I forgot to mention this last time as well. For those of you who don't know, I'm based in Pretoria in South Africa. We might have, I think they're on here already. Mehar, welcome. We've got a couple of ladies from India, so I'm very, very excited to have a proper international collaboration with this call today. You guys are also most welcome. Yeah, so if you guys want to pop me where you're based, I think most of you are from South Africa, but could be different cities. So I'd love to see that in the chat. I save it and I go through it afterwards. So I'm going to switch this webcam off and switch over to my cell phone, which shows my working space. Oh, hi, Nala from Algeria as well. Lovely. So we are having a nice international crowd. Yeah, so just give us a second to stop everything and mute. Please don't go away. We're going to switch over to the art table just now. Okay, sorry about that. Just a quick delay. Right, so there's a lot going on this page, but we're going to be walking through it. So a lot of you are joining me tonight for the very first time. And what everyone enjoyed last time, which I'll just show you the previous page here, was really just playing a bit with color swatches. So we practiced taking our colors from the darkest dark to the lightest lights. And from that, we played with mixing complementary colors, which is colors that are opposite on the color wheel. I'll recap that in a little bit. And to see what the color is that it makes in the middle. So yes, that's what we did last week, but I'll still recap. Sorry, we're just deciding on the view on this side. I'll recap as we go. So even if you didn't attend last week's online session, you haven't missed out, and I'll include the video recording from there. So I was really just playing, and then I decided that this will make a good topic for today's session, because a lot of you guys said, first off, you'd love to do some more of the limited palette, playing with 2 or 3 colors and mixing those together, and then also to see how we go from a blank page to a painted page and how we apply those techniques here. So this is just something I did for fun, and our project's going to look a little bit different, because this one I did use pen details and then color that in, but I actually decided it's a very good challenge, because we want to play with our brush technique. We want to practice taking our brush from the thickest stroke to the thinnest stroke, and you'll see here specifically is where I used that graded effect that we practiced last week. So I'll recap it quickly. And for example, the sky is it looks very intricate, but it's actually a very simple wet and wet technique. And there will be some wet on dry where we add the details, and I'll be doing more color variation like these ones, just so that we can play with the color mixing. Before we get into that though, to address the question of supplies, I played a little bit with normal printer paper. Now this is really just play. I used some leaves as stamps, just to give you guys some ideas. So I taped down my paper. Now I think masking tape you might be able to get in the aisle of just a normal general goods store. The idea is to try and find things that are household items that you can paint with. So you guys can look out for that. But if you have painted with anything interesting, let me know. But I just want to show you, because a typical problem with thin paper is that it buckles and it warps. So you won't be able to do, you'll probably struggle a bit with the painting that we're going to do today with a lot of the wet. But in the second version, I'm going to try and give you some tips or see what we can do that the paper doesn't buckle as much. But I just want to show you that the masking tape, I wet this whole paper before I started painting and then let it dry and then paint it over again just to see how it handles it. And it's actually surprisingly fat. I don't know if you can see like that. So you would be able to scan this or cut it out and paste it on a card, or still do something special with it. And that's where I want to go, is to equip you guys with whatever supplies you have, whatever you have on hand, to create something that's going to give you a creative kick. It doesn't have to be a landscape masterpiece, but something that you can enjoy, and that you can, if you cut up a little part like this, if you can see there kind of cropping, and you stick that on and you doodle over it, it becomes a beautiful card that you can convert into a digital format with a scanner or a camera and send it to a friend, or then give it to them when this whole lockdown story is over. We're also in South Africa, extended to lockdown until at least the end of April. So we're all getting creative in ways to be creative. All right, so I'm going to take this out of the way. So I mentioned in my email, just get my practice paper, that you guys can have a practice sheet of paper. So I'll just show you again the paper that I use. I enjoy these sketchbooks, which is really great, from Canson. You can get them in South Africa from Art Savings Club. You can order them online. And these guys are still taking orders, which they'll then complete when the lockdown is over. So if you can support small businesses like that, it'll be awesome. But this is a really amazing, cheap watercolor paper. No, it's not going to take an unending amount of layers, but you can do quite a lot with it. Pardon the sticky notes, it was for last week's class, just for some examples. Here was just the color swatch example that I showed, that you can look up color mixing charts or making your own mixing chart. And just another example of color mixing to show you guys what you can do with a limited palette. What I like about having a sketchbook like this is you can have all of your experiments together in one place. So you'll see it's quite a random collection of stuff. But when I page through it, I can remember, oh, I was playing with this. I think these are the pages where my creative color play idea that my Skillshare class is based on first came from, to do random textures and convert them into doodles that you can cut up. So that's what's nice about something like this. but having loose papers is also perfectly fine. So I'll show you. Just going to start on a blank page. Okay, so let's just do a warm-up. I'll put our little lighthouse over there for now. And the cool thing about this lighthouse, I'm going to guide you through just the basic outlines to draw it as well, because it's actually just very simple shapes. And that's the beauty of watercolor and drawing and painting, is you can break something down into a triangle, a rectangle, another rectangle, and just a rounded shape. And by adding details in a specific way, we transform it into something that feels 3D, because we have one side darker and one side lighter. All right, so I just quickly want to recap our color shading technique. And I must say, I can't get enough of this. It's such a fun way to get to know my colors. Just quickly to show you what supplies I'll be using. I'll be using the White Knights, St. Petersburg White Knights. This is what we call full pans. So you also get half pans that's half that size. And you also get tubes. I'll show you guys again quickly. This is an example of the Winsor & Newton cotton tube. They're also nice and affordable. And you can just squeeze it out on a plain ceramic palette like this, a ceramic plate. It's just a side plate. And mix it on there. You don't need anything fancy to mix on. And when you've squeezed it out, you'll see that the paint dries. So at the end, between a tube and a pan, there's not a lot of difference, aside from if you were going to do really, really big paintings and you wanted to squeeze the paint out fresh. It makes it easier to mix up a lot of paint. But it's actually more economical to use your paint dried like this, because you use only the amount that you need rather than picking up too much of it while it's still wet. So it's just personal preference, whether you prefer the pans or the tubes. And the White Knights is a really great set if you're looking to upgrade at any point. They're artist grade pigment, so they're not the most expensive brand out there. And I know Lisa and I have compared paints in the past, and she especially has mentioned that they go through a bit more quickly than your other artist grade paints, but they're beautiful colors and lovely to work with and a nice intensity. So yeah, that's what I'll be using. This is just a custom travel palette that I made for myself from a metal tin. All right, so I want to show you the 3 colors that you saw in my sketchbook sheet just now. So that's a ruby red. You can just use any, this is a warm red, but you can use a cool red or whatever's on your side. So I'll just show you what I mean quickly between warm and cool red, so we can talk about color temperatures. So there you'll see, I just picked up, I wet my brush. I used 2 jars of water, so they're both clean at the moment, but the one I'm going to use to rinse off, and the other one I'm going to use to pick up clean water. So I just dip my brush in the water, I pick up a nice thick amount of pigment, and I just brush it down my page. And when it gets to a point where I feel there's enough of the thick color, I rinse my brush in the rinsing jar, and I wipe it clean on my kitchen towel. You can see how much color still comes off there. And then I take clean water and I just take that further down, and you'll see how beautifully that paint runs into that water. If I lift it, you'll see that it continues to run. And this is also actually called wet and wet technique, because we're putting wet water onto wet paint and that flows together. And this is how you get a graded effect. And this is what we'll do to do those stripes of the lighthouse to go from dark to light. Right. So I just want to show you a couple of reds so I can just quickly explain color temperature, because it's going to affect our color mixes. I'm taking a lot more of a warmer red. So if you look at this red, I hope it shows up on the camera, but it's almost got a little bit of a pinkish shade to it. This one will be a lot more orange. You can see it almost looks like an orange in comparison. And you'll notice when you swatch out your paints, this is a good way to get to know your colors, because some of them will have a different intensity range than others. Some will be able to go much darker there and then have a bigger range in between than others. Cool. We're going to cover a mix to get red just now. I'll show you a quick trick. So that's our warmer red. If you don't have a red, so red is a primary color. Who asked the question? Okay, Taryn, so maybe pop me a quick message on what, if you maybe have a pink color. Otherwise, if you don't have red, we're just going to do a funky lighthouse for you, which is also fine. You're going to see, even if we paint the lighthouse in different colors, maybe a blue will work well, or if you want to go really funky, a purple or something like that. Red is a primary color, but technically the full primary is a pink. So if you had pink and you add a bit of yellow, you could get a red. But I'm assuming if you don't have red, I don't know if you have pink either. Okay, permanent rose is perfect, perfect. I'll show you guys this trick as well. And I think Lisa made me aware of this the first time. She does a color mixing workshop, which I haven't been able to attend, but her being my neighbor, we've done painting dates. I've got the wrong, I'm picking up the wrong color here, sorry guys. But we've done some painting dates, and I actually didn't know that you get red from permanent rose. So if you guys want a more in-depth session even on color mixing, you can pop me a message and I'll send you Lisa's details. I'm just washing that out because it was the wrong color. So I'm quickly going to take my equivalent of a pink, just so that we can see the color temperatures fully together. So there, it's almost looking like a magenta in comparison. This is what's called Quin Rose in Winds and the White Knights, but it's very close to permanent rose. And let's see if we now add a bit of a yellow to warm it up. And I'm going to explain how this works just now. It'll start going, depending on which yellow you mix it with, it'll start going towards a red before it becomes really orange at the other side. So Taryn, you're going to have to play a little bit around with the shades that you do have. See if you add yellow to your permanent rose, what it does. So I just quickly want to use my color wheel and just help you guys understand what's happening here before we go on to the next part. So if you see here, our red is our primary, which we now said is actually more in painting often a pink color. And then we have yellow, which is the other primary, and blue. And you can see there's variations to both sides. So your blue side is your cool colors on your color wheel, blue and green. And then yellow and red become your warm colors. But as you mix them together, like we saw here, there's a range that happens in between that then makes whether you have like a warmer red or a cooler red on the spectrum. And as you play with your colors, you'll see that some of them mix better together than others. We're not going to go into too much depth tonight. But like I said, if you want a more specific session on that, I can pass you along Lisa, or a lot of you know her as Elizabeth, those of you who know her. All right, so this is the color swatches that we'll be using. And this is also practicing the wet and wet technique. And the other thing that we're going to practice is to just put down a clean wash of water. So you're just dipping your brush into the clean water and pick up any color from your palette. I'm going to take the blue just to demonstrate that it's a sky. And you're just going to drop it in there. And I'm doing this very randomly. You can kind of imagine some cloud shapes in there. And you can see how it's blending of its own accord. Even as I move the page, you can see how it's moving there. And this is what's called wet and wet. You can do this on clean water with color or onto an existing color with another color. And this is where the magic of watercolor happens, how the color spreads and it does its own thing. So if I was now to add, let's say, a bit of gray in there for clouds, that'll blend by its own in places where I haven't necessarily touched the brush to paper. And I'm just gently touching a little bit of color into that paper and you'll see how it spreads. So a watercolor painting, you can only really just evaluate the finished product when it's really completely dry, because the paint still moves as it dries. Okay. We might have a slight Zoom challenge. It was supposed to allow us to go past the 40-minute mark. If we do bomb out, I'll send you guys, see if I can send a new meeting link. So just keep an eye on your emails. So if you lose connection with me, just check your emails. I was going to address this later on, but let's see what happens. All right, so that's wet on wet. And then we're going to just quickly do a couple of brush exercises because we want to be able to use our brush to its fullest extent. So you guys will see me working with a size 12 quite often. I have a size 2 lying around, which I often just don't use because I get so zoned into the process. And if you have a nice brush, this is my cheap one that I mentioned last week. It's simply called Artist's Brush, or you really just want something that's got a golden Taklon synthetic hair that's quite cheap. It shouldn't cost you, they cost anywhere between 10 Rand and 50 Rand depending on the size. The size 12 was 25 Rands, South African currency. So golden Taklon synthetic hair is great, and it still comes to a nice sharp point when it's wet. And you want to practice being able to use the same brush to quite a thick and a thin line in the same brush. So I'm going to switch to the cheap brush so that you can see what is possible. The other one was the Princeton Tap, which isn't that much more expensive. It's just over 100 Rand, but it is definitely a step up. I'm quite enjoying it. I'm going to take a dark purple color. Okay, so you're welcome to paint along with me or continue to. The easiest is if you want to mix up a little bit of paint. I should have cleaned my palette. I forgot about that. I'll do that in a sec. It's nice to just mix up a bit of a wash of paint. Now, there was a question from last week's session about knowing how much paint to mix up and not wasting paint. So this is the beauty about watercolor. You'll see here, there's still color on my palette. And if I was to spray this with water, which I'll do quickly, it's going to reactivate that mix. I also spray my colors with a spray bottle before starting to paint. It just activates the pigment and it makes it easier to pick up. So you'll see now, if I go back to that other color that was on here, I can actually pick it up. All that would have happened is that water dilutes it, because water acts as your white color in watercolor. We don't have, you do get a white that you can add, but it's not effective. The beauty of watercolor lies in adding water to make it lighter and adding more pigment to make it darker. So I'm picking up my wash, and as you'll practice, you're going to notice different consistency in your paint. So you'll see this one is quite runny. It moves fairly easily when I tilt it. I'll show you a thicker mix just now. But there's that paint that was sitting on here for, I don't know, it might have been a week, and I'm just reusing it. So you really don't have to worry about mixing up too much paint. You can always go back and reuse it if it's a color that you like. And now I'm just going to take my brush and press as much of the tip and the belly, this is the core part of the brush, to the paper to flatten it so that we can get a thick line. So I'm just dragging the brush down. And you'll see as we do that, because I didn't have that much paint on my brush, there's these white streaks in the paint. Now this is actually a beautiful effect. If I was going to turn it like this, you can imagine this being the beginnings of a lake with some sparkly light reflecting on there. So for me, the focus when I teach my workshops as well is, I don't feel there's a right or wrong in watercolor. I feel there's tools to get certain things done. And if you wanted to get one effect and you got the opposite effect, obviously you're going to be upset and frustrated. So my whole point with these sessions as well is to equip you guys with more knowledge about the tools, to know how to fix certain mistakes and things that maybe don't turn out the way that you want them. So I'm going to mix up a little bit more paint. I'm just going to continue with the purple. It's difficult to see here, but notice on your side, if you pick up more paint, how the consistency of the mix changes. So you can go anything from like a thick honey consistency all the way to cream, to milk, to kind of a watery tea, to very, very thin water. And playing with these kinds of consistencies on your own with these techniques is also a great way to get a feel for your watercolor. Obviously, the thicker it is, the darker the color will be. And the thinner it is, the more water is added. So the lighter the color will be. So I'm going to see if I can now get enough color in my brush. That's the other difference between cheaper synthetic brushes and your more expensive and natural hair brushes. They keep more water and more paint in the brush, so you can do more lines before having to pick up a fresh brush of paint. But they already were better. So just play with a couple of lines and see how thick you can get it, and how much paint you need on your brush to be able to complete a line like that. Okay, I'm just going to rinse off. And now I'm just playing on this page, so I'm going to layer over here just to demonstrate to you guys wet on dry technique as well. But you're welcome to keep them separate if you want to keep the page that you're doing for reference in future. And then we'll be switching over to our actual painting just now. It's just nice to have a sheet to practice on. So because this paint is mostly dry, you'll see that when I put my line over it, it's going to have the same effect as putting it on dry paper. So I'm going to demonstrate and then I'll explain how I get the thin line. So this is from the same brush. Just keep my line there and I'm going to slowly, right, so again, you just take a little bit of practice. So what helps me a lot is to use the side of my hand and just gently steady myself on the table, but you also don't want to go too slowly. You actually just want to get a nice motion and keep your brush at a completely 90-degree angle with your paper, so completely upright, so that it has a very, very light touch. And don't worry if you don't get this right the very first time. It takes a bit of practice, and I'm going to give you a nice tip for what you can do with these practice sheets just now. Just want to do another one, so you'll see there's mostly dry paper, and I'm going to do it over. If this happens, that your hand is over your wet paint, just rotate. Always rotate your paper to where you're comfortable painting. So I'm just going to do it the other way around. And I'm taking, see, very thin line all the way down. Now, as I come down, I press a little bit more harder. But you can see there, this is now what's technically called glazing. So it will layer over that existing color. And because it's a student grade paper, you can't do too much of this, but you have to work, as long as you work gently, you can layer it. And even if you were going to work on your really thin paper, I think as long as you keep a very gentle hand with your brush and just add a couple of strokes, you'll be able to add a layer of wet on dry. So those of you guys who are stuck at the moment with less than ideal paper, you can still practice your brush strokes. You might not get the same wet in wet effect that you would on watercolor paper, but it's good to know that, because then you know as long as it's not doing what you want to, it's very possible that it's simply the paper and not the artist, and that's an important thing. Okay, you can keep this practice page aside. We're going to just jump in with these techniques now. I just quickly want to check in on our technical issue. So just give me one moment. Okay, there's less than 2 minutes before Zoom might kick us out and that we might need to start another meeting. So let me rather not start the painting right now. If there's any specific questions on what I've covered here, quickly pop them for me in the text. And I'll otherwise just quickly think of 1 or 2 more things to demonstrate on this paper, and then we'll see whether Zoom is going to kick us out into a second meeting or not. All right, so I don't have a specific example right now, but this was different techniques that I practiced. And remember I said with this page, if you were going to fill up this whole page with lines, practicing it, you don't have to feel like you're wasting paper. You can do an experiment. And okay, you can do an experiment and cut up your paper into gift tag size papers like this, cut a hole in it and put a string through and even write something nice on the card. And this is literally just playing with texture with a sponge that I have on this page. And you can in that way transform your practice pages into something beautiful and feel like you've improved your skill, but that you don't waste sheets of pages. The first request we have there is a demonstration of the Lamy Safari. So this isn't watercolor per se, but it's one of my favorite things now to draw with underneath my watercolor. It's a fountain pen. So Lamy makes a bunch of fountain pens. I think you can see the nibs there. And from Right Gear, because it's all they had in stock. And now with COVID-19, everything's delayed. So I'm hoping my ink will last. Just to show you, so you can make a variety of lines depending on your pressure. And you can also switch it around. I'll just fix that quickly. Let's see. Is it not better? Why is it not focusing? Okay. Okay, so we're just quickly doing a refocus for the camera. Focus, focus. Sorry guys, we'll sort out the technical stuff just now. Let's see, is it any better? No, it's still not focused. Okay, we'll fix it just now. Just quickly going to switch the video off and on again. Wat weer is hy wys nie my I muted it. I didn't the technical challenges. It's not showing on the screen. I know I'm unmuted. Okay, is the focus better on the painting page? Okay, guys, if you see technical issue, just pop us a message. All right, so just lastly, if you turn it the other way around, you can get really fine lines, and it just has a really nice smooth feel for when you're drawing whatever. So I just love doodling with it and doing, let's say, our lighthouse, a quick doodle. Yeah, and then I think we should be able to carry back on to our normal one. Is it useful to have more than one brush? Larika, yes, I think definitely it is. It also depends a lot on your personality. So I think I enjoy having the flexibility in a single round brush, but then there's also times that I enjoy using a flat brush for different texture. And if I could, my phone is fixed at the moment, but if I could send you a photo, I'm definitely not a one brush kind of gal. There's a lot going on here, so it's fun to play with different sizes and different shapes. So really just play with them and see what you like and what fits your painting personality. Top brushes you should have. So my main recommendation is, and what I start my workshops off with, is a round brush like this, a size 12. Just a plain golden Taklon synthetic hair is fine. So Prime Art makes one. Like I said, this is an artist's brush is what it's called. And a size 4, a size 2 is also nice if you want to do finer detail. And then something like a flat brush can cover more area. So this is obviously a small one, but it makes different textures, and the synthetic ones also aren't expensive. So that will get you started in a nice way, and then you'll get a feel for what you like. Alrighty, so I'm going to put this aside. Keep it handy because we are going to test out one or two things and try it out. I'm just going to switch to normal printer paper because I just want to show you breaking down the lighthouse that you don't know where to start. So you're going to take your pencil, and I must now just get my painting back because it was just here. There we go. Okay. So I'm just quickly going to show you, I'm going to use a thick liner pen. These microns are also great. They don't have the same line variation as the Lamy Safari, but they're still a lot of fun to work with and waterproof. But I just want to show you in a thick line how I drew this lighthouse. So I wanted something that looks like it's going from the bottom upwards. So that's why it's quite strongly tapered in this kind of cartoon drawing effect. So you're just going to think of a triangle, and because you're working with pencil, you can draw the full triangle even if you want to, because as long as it's light and you erase it afterwards, you can just use that as a guideline. So I'm just going to not finish the triangle, have it more or less about there, and don't finish the base of your lighthouse because there can either be grasses or rocks or anything there. When I draw this rectangle, I just make the edges slightly rounded, and that already gives it a different effect. I add basically just 2 lines for the cylinder there, and you can decide whether this lines up with that part. If you want to go funky and make it bigger or smaller, it's fun to doodle and try different ones in different styles. I think I showed that before. Just different doodles that you can try out. And then we have basically just a little round cap. So I'm just going to make a round rectangle, round point at the bottom, at the top, straight line, and a circle. And that's your basic shape. All right. So the next thing we do to get this perspective going is this is what's close to the viewer. So it always looks bigger, and then it gets narrower to the top. So you just want to keep that in mind when you're drawing out your colored bands, that they're going to be smaller and closer together as we go to the top. So they become thinner and thinner towards the top. I'll just shade these in roughly so you can picture it. And you're just drawing your pencil outlines. Erase if you need to, just erase gently. I use a kneaded eraser like this because it doesn't leave little bits on my paper, but whatever you have is fine. And then you'll see here, I left this for last because we're going to paint darkly over it. But there's a little bit of detail here. Now I just use reference pictures from Pinterest and take the details that I like. So there's often a railing that goes around like this, and I'm not bothering to be too specific. Adding 1 or 2 elements there. I like repeating the circle from there. And I saw this on a Skillshare class I was watching, where she just drew in the glass like this, little zigzags, and I like the character that it gave. But you can also do lines like that, like your colored glass, or really whatever pattern you fancy. And the same is going to go for the window. So I just 4 little blocks, leaving some space between them, and that gives a nice effect. And then at the end I decided to put a frame around it. So you can do that, or you can do one single little square like that that's colored, that we're going to make dark with paint, or even a round one or a circle one. So what's fun about this is you can doodle a bit and customize it to what you want. You can even keep the lighthouse straight, like I had with my color practice. You can just do it like this. So really mine is just a guideline. Please use your own preference and draw whatever you like. So I'm quickly just going to put this to the side where you guys can see it, and just draw my own one onto my paper. The reason I've got 2 papers here, I'm going to do one that's similar to this style, and then hopefully we can do a quick texture demonstration here. I might do some things in between as the first one is drying. So I keep my pencil very light when I'm drawing it. So for this one, we're not going to do pen right now. Sorry, I mentioned this in the beginning, but just to repeat, this was just a fun project that I did, that I had the pen first, and I actually just used a cheap dipping pen like this with ink, just to try it out. But I actually wanted to use this example so that we can see how thin we can get our brush strokes. So it's not going to be exactly the same as the pen, but let's see what we can do. And then obviously if you have a pen available, you can add that afterwards. But for now, keep your pencil, and then we're going to add the darker detail at the end. Right, so I'm just quickly drawing. And what makes this look like a fun picture is if you really distort that proportion, like take it way up high. I'm just adding that rectangle, the light base. Yeah, I know you can't see the pencil. I'm just quickly repeating what I did in the sketch. So if you're still drawing, you can just follow that, or pop me a question if you get stuck. Let's keep them the same so you can see the different styles. And painting in different styles and in different ways, and like I know for myself as well, I had to force myself to not always use pen first, and to try out doing the same detail with my brush. And it's a good way to just play. I put this too high now, but that's fine. Let's maybe make this one a little bit shorter. So I'm just lightly erasing. But it's a nice way to just step out of your comfort zone a little bit and try out different techniques, especially if your paper isn't too expensive. That's a nice way to play and just have the different effects there. Okay, so we're going to start our first one with our red lines. I'm just quickly going to show you the colors that I'll be using. So in this one, I just use 2 colors. I use the red, and this is a Payne's gray. But because we're looking at color mixing as well, I'm going to show you guys how I combine the 2 greens and a red. So I just quickly want to show you. This is the red I had earlier, which is kind of more on the cooler side red. Mine is called ruby, but you can have these scarlet or permanent red, I think is another one, or just see between your two reds which one looks like the cooler one. And then this green is an emerald green, which is a very light, like the gem emerald. You can see it over here. And then I have olive green, but a lot of you will have sap green or just a kind of yellowish green, anything that you have. And we're just going to play with some color combinations. If you want to try different colors, that's also perfect. The reason the ruby and the emerald goes together is they're both cool colors. So you'll see that they mix a range that over here becomes a black, which then becomes a neutral gray. So we're kind of practicing mixing our grays from two colors instead of just using a convenience gray like Payne's gray. There's nothing wrong with using Payne's gray. It's just for this purposes, we want to do some color mixing. Okay, I'm just quickly going to clean this palette. Thanks for the thumbs up. All right, so while I'm cleaning this, have a quick think about your colors. If there's any question about anyone using different colors than me, you're welcome to pop them up quickly. And if you ever wonder about where to start with colors, canva.com, you know, the design app, has a really nice color wheel that you can pick your colors and then you can pick what kind of color scheme you want to try out. So what we're doing is doing complementaries, like I said, the two opposites on the color wheel. So they can give you nice ideas for that. You can even, if you type in emerald complementary palettes in Pinterest, you get beautiful pictures there as well. That just gives you ideas for what kind of palette to use. And then you just match your colors from your paint. And that's the closest to that. So I just sprayed my palette, wiped it with my brush, and I'm just wiping it with some toilet paper because we will be doing some mixing. And this is helpful because if you mix too many colors together, you end up with what we call mud, which is a wonderfully ugly color, especially if it's not what you wanted to go for. So that's another way to keep your colors clean, is make sure your palette is clean and just use your brush that's wet to wipe it. Okay, so let me just move the sketch out of the way. Is everyone finished drawing these? Can I take this away? Speak now or forever hold your paintbrushes. 1, 2, 3. I'll bring it back if anyone's stuck, but you'll see it take form here. I'm just quickly going to switch to the back of my page just so that you guys have a fresh page for what I'm working on. That's another way to stretch your paper in lockdown mode, is just switch it around. Just a reminder that this is 300 GSM paper, where our printer paper is 80 GSM. So there's a significant difference in thickness, and that's why watercolor paper handles the water so much better. I tape this down because it keeps it flat and it prevents it from buckling. But if yours buckles and you don't have masking tape, just spray it with water or a clean brush on the back of your painting on the other side and put it under a stack of books, and it'll dry nice and flat. Okay, so we're going to take our red, and you just want to start off with just a nice clean red. Not worrying about mixing too much, we're just getting into the painting. And I haven't drawn my line, so let me quickly do that. And if you want to, you can for yourself just set out a couple of rocks or grasses at the bottom, just if you want to leave a bit of that line broken, but it's not necessary. I'm just going to fill that in as I paint. So let's do another line. Lighthouses are really fun like this because they're actually just a couple of elements and you can really play around with them. And because we have a small page, we're going to practice some brush techniques. So you want your water handy. You'll see that my second one is kind of transformed, but it's not too dirty that it's going to affect my painting. It's difficult to see there, but so I'm going to put some red. My light is coming from this direction. So it's going to be lighter on this side, and then the shadow will fall on this side. So I'm putting my color on my shadow side. So it's just important to decide that at the beginning, because you want that to be consistent in your painting, and that will add cohesiveness and more realism to your painting, even though it's not in a realistic style. So I'm making sure to clean my brush thoroughly. The red actually takes a bit to come off. and just cleaning it on some paper towel in between. And you'll see that this is still shiny, so it's still wet. If I tilt that, you can see, there's my shine. But you'll know that your paint is wet from the shine on the paper. So that's why I know I can add water to this. And by drawing out the water, I'm drawing out the color, and that color will automatically blend. And I'm just taking my brush and cleaning, making a clean straight line there at the end of the lighthouse. So little white spots like that is brilliant. You can leave them in there. It adds a little bit of character and what I call sparkle to your lighthouse. If you feel like the color isn't strong enough on this side to begin with, or if you want to emphasize that shadow, you can pick up more straight pigment and just add it on the left-hand side, and it will blend by itself. I'm going over my own lines. It will blend by itself towards the other side. And all of these little things just add character. If you feel imperfections, you're going to see it just adds a little bit of character. I'm not a precision painter. I love this kind of loose feel with watercolor. Yeah, so I like working with happy accidents. If you're happy with that line, you can move on to the next one. Just make sure you've got enough paint on your brush still. Pick up more paint as you need to. Dipped it in the wrong water. Cleaning it out. And if you have too much pigment on your brush, you're going to have less of that graded effect. Another way to do this is to put water on the other side first and leave a slight gap between the two, and then touch the color and the water together, and it'll have a little bit of a different blending effect. So that's something to experiment with. So I'm just quickly going to do these lines. And you'll see as we go further towards the top, the prominence of your shading actually disappears. Because if you think about it, you're further away from the painting, so you can't see quite as much detail. So if you don't have such a big difference between the two, don't worry. And if you feel like they're not blending well enough, you can just go in and work it a little bit with your brush, just very gently. And that's where that thin stroke we practiced helps you, because it helps you keep a light hand on your brush. Doing the last line, I'm going to put too much variation in there. Okay. Now, putting my reference picture and something else. I just quickly want to go back to my original example, but I've put it underneath my painting. This is going to dry just for a moment. Where did it go? There we go. Sorry. Okay, so this is now what we did is called wet on dry. So you can use a hair dryer to dry these layers, but I'm just quickly going to switch over to this different side and just play, just to show you guys some examples of texture and that kind of thing. So someone specifically asked how you can do different textures, and already actually on here, there's some texture showing, and that's because I had a bit more water on my brush when I did that. And you can either go, oh no, it's not what I wanted, or I actually love the kind of texture. But it's just because there was a little bit of unevenness between the amount of pigment on this side and the amount of water on that side. And it just takes a bit of practice to see what created that effect. So for this one, I really actually just want to play. What I've been playing with is adding water in the background and adding the stripes loosely. I haven't even added lines. I'm making this one a bit more of a spiral line. You won't see it yet. And I'm just going to drop in paint randomly and just see what it does. I want to put some more paint along the side. And I don't know how this is going to turn out. I haven't planned this one. I'm just going with what I feel like. I just quickly want to put this over on that side because I want to splatter. Enough color. My assistant is holding my paper. Just hold it. So if this one is dry, you just put something over that so we can splatter some paint. So this is one way to create texture. You'll see that it creates little flicks of color. I'm just using my hand or my finger to flick. And I'm actually going to switch up and just mix up my emerald green with my red so that I can get a bit of a darker gray color. The thing with the emerald that I realized is you want to mix this up in your palette, because the reason I'm playing with emerald this much is I actually dislike it a lot because it feels like a Christmas tree or a candy cane, or it's a very plasticky color for me. So I figured out that if I mix it on my palette beforehand so that it looks right, then I'm more happy with it. So I'm going to flick. You could do a dry brush technique, but this is wet at the moment, so let's do that at the top. Dry brush is when I dab most of the color off my brush, and I'm just swiping it across the page, and it takes a little bit of practice with your paper, and I'm being very loose here. I'm not really worrying about the perfect lines, and we're just going to see how this turns out. It's actually a lot of fun. The other side of my painting is still drying. We'll go back to that in a moment. And you don't have to worry about painting along with us too much. You can just sit back for a moment and watch. I'm going to play with adding the outline there. And just a last color technique, a texture technique that I want to show you before we go back is I'm going to just take my olive green. Let's see if it shows up on this. So I'm just using the side of my brush again in a bit of a dry brush technique. But now I want to add in a bit of salt. Now, you can take this away. This is almost dry. This is just normal fine table salt. You can use different granules and it will have different effects. And what it does is it's going to absorb the water and the pigment around it. But you can't use a hairdryer if you're doing this because it takes away the effect of the salt. So I'm just sprinkling very little, less is more, over that grass area. And maybe a little bit on this background texture. And then we'll see what that does. Okay, so this is our texture play. That was quite fun. Switching back to our formal lighthouse. This is the formal lady at the dine. We are going to do the sky, because what you could do is if you're working on different parts of your painting, pay attention to where it's wet and work on an area that's not really going to touch that. So here, the sky is focused at the top and I don't have a lot of color going on there yet. So I'm quickly going to switch to that and fill in that color. Now, we're working with red and 2 greens in my case. So this could feel quite tricky. And this is now where the mixing comes in and where your practice sheet comes in, because you don't have to test your paint color straight on this page. You can test it on your practice sheet first so that you know that you've mixed up the right color. So if you pay attention here, the gray that I've got is actually more of a maroony dark color. So I know that I want to put a little bit more green in that mix so that it can have a stronger gray or a more neutral gray color. So that's how you work with your color mixes. And the reason we do this is it adds harmony to your painting. If I was going to use each of the colors in my palette, it's going to feel like a rainbow exploded all over it, and it's not going to make sense, and people won't know where to look in the painting. Where if you work with a limited palette of anything between 2 to 5 to even 8 colors at the most, you keep that harmony because your colors come from the same origin colors that you're mixing. So this is still very brown red. I'm adding more emerald. I'm testing it on my page, and that actually looks like a nice gray. A good test is to just add more water, because sometimes the pigment hides in the dark colors. So I didn't get my brush clean properly. Let's do that. There you can see this side. The gray is actually quite neutral, and I promise that was only ruby and green being mixed up in there. So once you're happy with the effect on the light color, leave that aside. This isn't a big painting, so you don't need to mix up a lot, and we're going to work wet and wet. I'm just going to put in a request to my assistant for fresh water. So I just want to show you guys, this is my cleaning water, and it's murky and dark. So when I start feeling like I battle to get the color of my brush, I at least usually stand up myself and change it sometimes. If he's not passing by anyway. So I'm just going to use this slightly more clean water for now. Oh my goodness, where does the time go? We're going to finish this in 10 minutes. We're almost out of time again, but we're almost done too. So I'm just quickly going to show you the wet and wet. I'm going to try and finish the bulk of it in 10 minutes, but those of you who still want to hang around, yeah, got lost in the fun. So we'll quickly finish the details. I'll switch over to the smaller details just now. So, just laughing at the comments in the text. You guys can go read that. Thank you, Danielle. Oh, yes, well, rainbows exploding over the page. Yes, if you use too much color, we'll just leave it at that. So I'm just using a light mixture. I'm adding water to my gray and making sure that my water was around that edge of the lighthouse. Now, someone asked about negative space. What I'm doing here, because the base of my lighthouse is over here, I'm concentrating the darkest bit of my color at the top so that it balances out the size and the weight of the color at the bottom. So I'm not going to fill my whole sky. I'm just going to fill that area around the smaller top at the top. All right, I'm carefully just going to put that down to dry. Switch these two around. Yeah, I saw. Okay, so the nice thing about adding green in here is you guys will see it really adds a pop of color. And again, that's because it's a complementary color. You don't want to use it in equal amounts. You want more of the one color than of the other. And then it just creates a nice pop. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. And in my case, the emerald green and the olive green actually mix quite nicely together. And what we're doing is we're using this complementary mix to do shadows. So that's going to be our darkest parts. I'm just kind of mixing up a variety of greens quickly and even adding a little bit of that existing gray mix to make like a dark green color. I'll quickly show you on the so this is where the harmony comes in. I'm not using any darker colors from my palette. I'm mixing them up with different quantities of my complementary colors. And because I've tested it, I know this brighter green with the ruby makes more of a brown color. So if I needed brown, I would have mixed it that way. So I'm quickly just going to pick up a bit of this green. And I'm just using very light flicks of my brush to add in a bit of grass, add in a bit more on the flat side of my brush for a bit more texture. And if we had more of the page here, you could kind of like have a little bit of a path leading out there. And this is very rough. It overlaps there on the red. It doesn't matter. And there we have picked up a bit of red. You'll see it creates a nice bit of shadow and depth here in the green. And that's, again, actually a bit of a texture as well, where your colors blend in together. I want to add a little bit more of that brighter green at the bottom, and then we'll go back just here and there for a bit of sunlight. And that contrast between your lighter, brighter green and your more muted colors is what creates the effect of sun and shade on a day. I'm just playing, adding a couple of varied lines with a very, very light stroke. Okay. This salt is still drying. I hope it dries before we're finished here. Just quickly going to take my hairdryer. So it's very handy to have a hairdryer nearby. This is a Take a Lot little travel special. Just drying it out. Okay. You don't want to really use your hands to feel whether your paper is dry because your hand has oil on it and it affects how the watercolor sits on your paper. So just have a look. If you really wanted to, you can use the back of your finger to just test. So this is actually very close to done. What I'm going to do is I want to pop a bit of, I know this was done with the pen and the sepia in the background, but for this, I actually just want to put a bit of dark red on the top and show you adding a little bit of the detail with the shade, and then we're done. Zoom is going to cut us off within 5 minutes. So if you have any last minute questions, or we'll be looking at different software that you can just use in your browser and that doesn't have a time limit, but we don't know how it handles a lot of people like 20 plus like we have here. So any suggestions for that is welcome. I'm just mixing up a bit more of a darker red by adding green and red until I'm happy with it. That's quite thick, so I'm just lightening it up. And I just want some light detail to define that top edge of my lighthouse. And there's a bit of a shadow there, and we've got that dark bit underneath there. And while I've got this color going, I actually want to use this to add just a bit more shading to the side of the tower because the white bits are still too white. So I'm just taking a light wash and running it over that existing dry color. And now I'm going to use my brush, clean water, and just take it out like that. And don't put the water in too far because you don't actually want too much of it going in there. So this is going to give us a bit more of a rough shadow. We just want to do the same there. I've still got a bit of that color on my brush, and I'm just very roughly working in those details over there. So I would still go in with a fine tip of my brush and add these definitions. I would do that with a nice dark color, so I'm mixing up a little bit more. Just always test it that you don't end up with a green shade where you wanted a red shade. So that's why it's good to keep your testing paper handy. You could do this with a finer brush. I'm just quickly going to see what happens if I use a thin brush. I'm just lightly going along the outside. I actually need to rotate this now, but let's just work like that. Here and there, I'm just going to touch some defining detail. I'm using that same shadow, just repeating a little bit in my grass, which just links the picture together with the darks and the lights. Going around that. Just adding in a little railing, just using a very, very light touch. And if you practice your thin strokes on your paper, this will become easier and more natural for you as you paint. So yeah, there you go. Okay, I understand the video is stopped. We'll fix it quickly. There we go, I'm back. Sorry, I don't know how much of that you missed. Is it now blurring again? See if we can fix that. Video. Okay, there it should focus. And then something that I really enjoy doing is just adding a couple of birds while I've got this dark color. Really just kind of school birds, a little V with a light touch and just varying the size. It just adds character, I feel, to your painting. So I've just added a bunch of birds. I'm quickly going to finish this one off with similar strokes. I'm just randomly putting a bit of definition, and I would actually like to put more red there, but I don't think we'll have time. Let's see. But the purpose of this side really was for the texture, and I'll just quickly show you. I'm just rubbing off the salt with my finger. I know I'm not going to put anything over that area, so the finger doesn't matter that much. Don't know if it'll show up. I'll post it. There we go. You can see little white flecks. That's where the salt was, and it creates a bit of a sparkly texture. So that's just different ways that you can create different textures and really just do the same painting in a very different style. I actually quite like how this is just very loose and vague, and this one is just different. So yeah, I think with a couple of Zoom seconds to spare, I've had so much fun. I lost complete track of time. If you guys have any questions, please email to me. I'll send you a link for this recording as well as the previous recording and a quick feedback form. Yeah, if you want to check out my Skillshare class, I have it at the end of my emails and on my Instagram. And I'd love to get in touch with you guys. I just love enabling people to paint and get to know their tools and to break through a barrier of feeling like I can't. Yeah, so if you're struggling with the amount of water on your page, just try different amounts, just play around with it. If